What's up, everybody? This is Patrick Soukup with Fort Collins Fellas coming at you guys with another interview. And today, me and Chris are very honored to have Darin Atteberry from Fort Collins and now with the Elevations Credit Union. He has a rich history of being a city manager for City of Fort Collins for dang near close to 25 years. And we look forward to this conversation and hopefully you guys enjoy it as well. So Darin, thanks for coming with us today. And if you could just do a brief intro of who you are and what you're about.
Yeah, thanks. Thanks, Patrick. And hi, Chris. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely.
I've given a little bit of thought to this podcast and I'm excited for the conversation. Just, getting to know you, sharing a little bit about my experience in Fort Collins. But I'll just tell you, I grew up on my grandparents' dairy farm in Sonoma County, California, which is about an hour north of San Francisco. Well, I say I grew up there. Whenever we had free time, we were at the ranch at our dairy farm. And then I had an uncle who was a city planner in the San Francisco Bay Area. And he was a real mentor of mine, made us laugh a lot, tickled us, did all that sort of stuff. But he was really professional, loved cities. And he exposed me to San Francisco and the Golden Gate Bridge and high rises and, trains under the Bay Area, the BART system. And I just
know that well.
Yeah. I kind of became, maybe an urban design architecture sort of geek, city geek. Went to city planning school at a school called Cal Poly in San Luis Obispo, California. And then furthered that in Atlanta, a graduate school at Georgia Tech, and studied city planning and civil engineering. And then worked for the transit system there, went up to Portland, Oregon for Vancouver, Washington, actually for about 5 years. Someone who's been with me the entire time is my wife. We met in high school at Anley High School in Sebastopol, California. And this November 12th of 2022 will be the 40th anniversary of our very first kiss on high school campus.
Cool.
So yeah, we got married in 1989, and I'm truly one of those guys that, and what'll come through is, look, I'm a person who's married to my best friend. My family matters to me a lot. We've got 4 kids ranging from 29 to 17. We've got 3 grandkids. I love my work, that I call career 1.0 in cities for the last 35 years. And I love the trajectory of my new career 2.0, and that's at Elevations Credit Union as the market president. I'm not Pollyannish. I have a general disposition that I'm an aspirational thinker. I believe in thinking big. Who wants to follow average, right? Where my journey takes me now is the market president for Elevations Credit Union for Northern Colorado. Also, Senior Vice President for Governmental Affairs and what we call strategic partnerships. And when I was city manager, I was leading an organization with about a $600 million budget and 2,400 employees. And now as the market president, I'm more of a collaborator. There's my coworker, the one person that I work with very directly on a daily basis. We call ourselves a wolf pack of 2. And but I have, really a leadership role here at Elevations in Northern Colorado, and I love what I'm doing. So bottom line is, I hope that when we leave this podcast, you're, as people get to know me, I'm not Pollyannish. I've been through some really, really hard times professionally. We've, building community it can be messy. I know you had Mayor Troxel as a guest previously, so he gave some insights as to what it's like to lead a community of about 180,000 people. So also, I'll just tell you, I had, in time as city manager, I had worked with over 40 council members in Fort Collins and 6 mayors just here, not to mention the elected leaders I worked with in Washington and Georgia and California as well. So you guys, you got to interrupt me and you got to keep me on topic. So
no, anyway. Darin, I love it. I lived in San Francisco.
Right.
In fact, that's where my wife and I met, and then we moved. I'm from Fort Collins originally, but just as you were kind of going through that, one of the things I want to talk to you about is, when somebody says you're a city manager of Fort Collins, it sounds like the day-to-day operations, and you obviously work very closely with the city council and mayors, like you just said, but and you have a background in this. I mean, I think you would, Georgia Tech, you had you graduated there with a civil engineering and city planning, but can you explain to our listeners and viewers, you mentioned San Francisco and these big cities. I lived in Los Angeles as well for about 13 years.
Okay.
What is I mean, and then you have Fort Collins, which has got 180,000 people.
Yeah.
Two completely different worlds almost.
Mm-hmm.
But are there a lot of similarities between what a city manager does, whether it's a Fort Collins or a San Francisco, and maybe is there any overlap in kind of how those operations work?
Yeah, no, that's a great question. And most of us, I think, in our civics courses, there's back when we were either in high school or maybe even in college, most of us either weren't paying attention, we fell asleep, or wasn't
Guilty.
taught. Yeah. And no, I wasn't asking for a confession. I'm just saying, but crazy thing is the most common form of local government in the United States is what's called the council manager form of government. Now, I don't know if you talked about this with Mayor Troxel, but most of us who know big cities, San Francisco, Los Angeles, New York City, others have those large American cities have what's called a strong mayor form of government. Okay. So in a strong mayor form of government, the mayor has both legislative responsibilities and executive level day-to-day operational responsibilities. So they are really a very powerful person individually, a powerful role. In a council manager form of government, the authorities and the powers are sort of pretty distributed. And so Fort Collins, for example, is what's called a charter city. So we have a home rule city charter, which is like our own little constitution that clearly outlines the powers and authorities and roles of each of the entities. In a council manager form of government, the council is essentially the board of directors. They hire and fire 3 employees: the city manager, the municipal court judge, and the city attorney. And the daily operations of the city are very clearly outlined in the city charter, that the city manager has the operational authorities over the 24/7 operation. So in other words, in a strong mayor form of government, a mayor can say at 3:00 in the morning, we need to turn this bus route off or we need to redirect it. In a council manager form of government, no single council member or mayor has that authority. That's the city manager's responsibility. And we would never turn off a bus at 3 a.m. So that's a bad example, but the mayor wouldn't be contacting a police chief directly and saying, hey, I need you to do this. That actually authority goes through the city manager. So let me just say, zooming back out, this council manager form of government is a lot like a corporate structure for a publicly traded company. So for example, our shareholders is the community.
The voters.
The 180,000 people that live here. The board of directors would be the mayor and the city council members who are elected by the residents. And then they hire and fire the 3 corporate executives. And then we have the day-to-day responsibility. Now, in a council manager form of government, one single council member, whether it's a mayor or council, they have no authorities whatsoever. It's when they get together as a body and vote as a majority to say, we want to allocate this amount to police, or we want to allocate this amount to, a project. So
Darrin, is that like, just starting to jump in here, but
yeah.
It's funny, when I worked in the golf industry, I always was a big believer of like the president having one person make the decision, because decisions were made a lot quicker, whether they were the right decision or the wrong decision.
Right.
Does this form kind of does it slow the process down in your eyes? Or, it kind of seems like you got to get everybody on board to make that decision, which is, I can see the pros and cons.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. I mean, I would say we have the best system on the planet, but it's not perfect.
Right.
So those checks and balances, the slowness we talk about in a sort of a derogatory way almost of government, some of that was designed into the system to be intentional that all voices are heard. I think Fort Collins does an extraordinary job at giving people the opportunity to participate in their local government. Every decision that's made is made out in public. It's made on TV. You can see it. You can go to community meetings. You can dialogue on social media, so forth. And it's interesting, and I hope to get to talk a little bit about my day job now at Elevations Credit Union, because one of the questions that a lot of people are asking me is, what are some of the fundamental differences between public sector and private?
Yeah.
And boy, I'll tell you, speed of decisions, absolutely. And as I reflect back, I think we're a better community because we do take the time to engage our public as a city. Elevations, as a member sort of centric organization, does the same thing. I mean, if the three of us own the company, we now, if the three of us own it, it's for profit. We have the choice to say we're moving in this direction, regardless of what our customers think. We're not even going to ask. In local government, because you're for the people, I think fundamentally we need to engage our community in most of the big decisions. And you know what, you guys, I think it's resulted, although it can be frustrating, and I think we can be more expedient now, having been in the private sector for 8 months or so. I kind of go back and see how we made some decisions. We could have been just as transparent, but we could have done it more quickly and been more responsive. So as you said, Chris, there's real pros and cons. And, my take after being in Fort Collins local government for 25 years, and then, the other places I've been, I think Fort Collins does it better than any other local government that I've seen.
That's so fascinating. I really had no idea kind of how that approach. And it's funny you brought it up, because I have in my notes that Fort Collins is a manager council style, and I was going to ask you about that.
Yeah,
that's
yeah. Yeah, and if people want to give
25 years, sorry to interrupt. So 25 years in the city of Fort Collins, that decision to go to the private sector probably wasn't made very lightly, or
it was
probably made over time. Now, looking back on it, can you tell us what was kind of maybe some determining factors, what pushed you to the private sector, and let us know kind of what you're doing now? And are you happy with that decision?
Yeah. Well, let me start with the last question. I couldn't be more happy. Like I said earlier, I loved Career 1.0. I wasn't running away from the city. I wasn't running away from the elected officials. I wasn't running away from the community of the staff. I just needed a change. The Wall Street Journal refers to as the Great Resignation. I actually have a different way I call it the Great Rethink. I think people are given the okay to rethink some of their big assumptions. I mean, I always saw myself at the city, right? I felt like I was an owner of this, one of the many owners of the city. And it's like, I still sometimes think, well, how did that happen? Right? After 25 years, I made such a change. So I'll come back to that in a minute. I think one of the things that I really want to credit my wife for, let me back up there. I was in a grocery store in the Harmony corridor about 2 or 3 years ago. And a woman came up to me and she introduced herself and she says, "You're our city manager, right?" And I said, "Yeah, I am." And she said, "I have to tell you, I was thinking about you the other day." And she said, "I think the best thing that you've done for Fort Collins in the time you've been here is that you stayed here and you raised your family here." And that has got me, I'm still talking and thinking about that. And by the way, when I'm out and about in the town, what I love about your hometown, you guys, I kid you not, my wife and I, or kids or whatever, over the years, we might be at the grocery store, we might be at the schools, we might be wherever we are, Old Town Square, wherever. People would always come up and say, "Thank you for this city. We love this community." I'll bet 1 out of 100 people were cranky and kind of mean, but nothing, with the exception of one time threatening. But
that's pretty good though. That's not bad there.
But I want to tell you guys, Patrick and Chris, Fort Collins is full of gratitude. And I think Fort Collins knows what it has in our community. And so my wife oftentimes, actually, honestly, over the 25 years that we were here, we had a couple of different really critical moments where we had opportunities to leave for a bigger, better job. Okay. And in city management circles, city managers last 5 to 7 years and then you move on, kind of like university presidents or superintendent of schools or whatever. It's just, they're in a sticky position, and typically they move every 5 to 7 years. And my wife and I, we were on a visit to another city. We were invited to come and think through, whether we wanted to be in that community. And we were flying home. I'll never forget. We realized we were grieving the loss of Fort Collins. This idea of going somewhere else, we were grieving that. Like, we should be celebrating, like, wow, I get this big job, this big opportunity. Deb had this amazing thought. She said, if we have to leave Fort Collins, I'm all in. I support that. Let's go. But if we don't have to leave, why would we leave? That's another disruptor for me, because in my industry, it's, oftentimes historically it's bigger cities. Just you go from Fort Collins to, I don't know, Sacramento to San Jose to Austin, or, places that are pretty cool places. And so now tying it back to the woman at the grocery store, we were intentional. And I attribute a lot of that to my wife saying, if we don't have to leave, why would we? And she said, the greatest thing you've done for this town is you've raised your family here. I put that together. And now I'm talking with you guys after 25 years having been in that office at City Hall. I am so glad that we made that decision. There were other opportunities. So the big story there is this idea of, it's maybe not always the next bigger and best thing. Maybe it's actually the journey of staying in one place and co-creating a community. And so I would say at Elevations, when, I have a deep respect for Elevations Credit Union. It's a non-for-profit entity, which credit unions are. They're member-centric. This credit union sells, as you know, probably, Chris, sells a lot of mortgages. We're very successful in that space. We're very successful in commercial lending and retail and wealth management. The city of Fort Collins was a Malcolm Baldrige recipient for excellence in business. We were the third city in the United States to receive that in 2017. Elevations Credit Union has received that recognition twice, both, I think it was 14 and in 20. We got to know Elevations that way. I got to know their leadership. I got to know one of my former mayors, Ray Martinez, and Ray's now on the board of Elevations Credit Union. So I'd gotten to know him and through that Baldrige journey. And, last summer, Jerry Agnes, the CEO, and I sat down and talked about what Elevations plans were for Northern Colorado. And in this non-for-profit member-centric model, not to oversell stuff, not to sell up, but to say, what do our members really need? And we love the Northern Colorado market. And Jerry and I started talking about that. And so, again, I wasn't running away from it. I felt like being in this role as market president at Elevations Credit Union, I can do community building, but just from a different side of the portfolio. So
what are, to kind of piggyback on that and looking into the future, and you've been here 25 years and now you're in the private sector.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit of what are the plans? I live in Midtown Fort Collins on College and Prospect, and there's a lot of stuff going on. I was going to talk to you about like Montama, but what are you guys working on, and what are some of your aspirations over the next couple of years? Yeah.
Now, are you referring to the city or Elevations Credit Union?
Both. How can what you do at Elevations Credit Union impact the city?
Yeah, thank you. That's a great question. I'll think out loud a little bit here because, here's what I know. I know that Fort Collins right now, would you guys know what the population was when you were growing up here? It was like 40,000.
1980. I have no idea.
90.
Okay.
90,000 or so.
90,000. Okay. So my wife and I moved here in 96. So we've been here 26 years. Here's what we know. Fort Collins right now is about 180,000 people.
That includes CSU, Darin?
It includes CSU,
okay,
correct. Okay. We know that it's going to grow to about 255,000 people or so. By the way, a lot of people think that population projection is just a swag, a dartboard, not at all. Actually, I will tell you, it's mostly science and mostly simple math and some art. So here's what we know. We know what our growth I keep doing this. We know that our corporate boundary is this, our city limits, and we know that our growth management boundary is this, okay? I think of usually just north of Anheuser-Busch, just in the 392 area down south, separating Fort Collins and Loveland, the mountains, and then essentially I-25 with some deviation, okay, of that. So that's our growth management boundary. We know that GMA, growth management area, we know that that's going to be about 255,000 when it builds up. We know what past population projections have been, or in other words, the real market, what's happening. We know where the infrastructure is and where the gaps are. We know what the underlying zoning is, right? So this is going to be residential, this is going to be commercial, this will be industrial. We model all that, bring it all together, and then we can project what the growth rate will look like. So I will tell you that no doubt in my mind that this community will be about 250,000 people sometime within the next 20 years. Now, the question is how does that happen? Mm-hmm. How does it happen in a way that all the things that we love about Fort Collins continue when it's a community of 250,000 versus a community of 60,000, Patrick, maybe when you were born. So I used to always say to the mayor, Wade Troxel, who was born and raised here, hey, our job is not to mess this place up, right? We are so fortunate to have a university of 30,000+ students and 6,000 faculty and staff. It makes it a resilient community. But you guys should carry the torch of never let anyone say anything other than this is a college town, even when we're 250,000 people. So many people would say to me as city manager, well, it's not a college town anymore. It's just another, to the contrary. If CSU weren't here, we would not be the community that we are.
I agree.
So what I love is when Tony Frank or Joyce McConnell talk about being attractive to the best and brightest faculty and staff and students, they count Fort Collins in that, because people are going to be attracted to a world-class university if it's in a world-class community. So I'll just ask you guys and the listeners, let's never lose that. Let's never have CSU just become sort of another business in town. We can't have that. So anyway, back to your question, we're going to grow up to 250,000 people. And the question is how do we do that? I believe that you do that in a very thoughtful, in a very planned kind of way, not in a willy-nilly just have at it, and not in a no growth kind of way, but in a managed growth kind of way. And I know that's what you guys believe as well, but the city has a long-range growth plan. It's called City Plan. Now back to Elevations and my role. I believe in this community deeply. And I also believe in the brand of Elevations Credit Union. And so for me, it's not, as crazy as this sounds, it's not just a job. It's matching the quality and the commitment to service and the commitment to excellence to our members and to our future members. And I kind of see this as just a great fit for our community. I see.
Are you going to be working with the financing side of building the community? Is Elevations going to step in and finance the growth? How?
Well, in terms of commercial development, in terms of helping support non-for-profits, in terms of playing a philanthropic role, absolutely.
Okay.
I love, and that's one of the things that I think I bring to Elevations is that, over the last 25 years, the relationships that I've built, with the development community, with the non-for-profit community, philanthropic, and so forth. How do we come beside those folks and help in some cases be the lender to that commercial development, right? So I think I use a pie chart that says, if this is what it takes to build community, certainly city government plays a part of that. So does K-12, so does higher ed, so does philanthropy, so does non-for-profit, and then the for-profit thing. If you and I love the flowers downtown that are going to start popping up in the next couple of weeks, well, it's the private sector that it's the economic activity and churn that makes that happen. Mm-hmm. And it's not local government helps facilitate that. But if it isn't for a vibrant economy, the local government isn't going to have the tax revenues to actually do that. So when I look at the pie chart of building community, And I was on this part of it for 25 years. I get to kind of just be now part of this part of it. So you guys, as crazy as it sounds,
it's like a perfect fit.
It is. And that's what gives me goosebumps these days. And here's the cool thing is I get to do it in a town that I've fallen in love with. That, with grandkids and kids here, honestly, I don't see being anywhere else.
Well, Elevations is extremely lucky to have you. And, because like you said, 25 years of building relationships and, we talked about it, working for my uncle and being a part of Old Town Square. And if there was issues or concerns or policies or things of that nature that he felt like he needed to talk to somebody, it was to talk to Darin. You were the staple of this, this kind of sure thing that was a part of the city of Fort Collins. And, as big as Fort Collins has grown, which is substantially, there is still, this kind of, there's a lot of movers and shakers, but there are a good group of them that are still here and have been here for many, many, many years. And those relationships that you built with them have to be just invaluable for Elevations Credit Union moving forward, for both on a personal level and then also on a business level, because you've built 25 years of trust. And I think it would be a natural progression for them to do business with somebody that they know and trust. So
thanks,
really
Patrick.
Curious to see how you move forward with Elevations on that side.
Yeah.
It's a pretty easy conversation with, somebody that you've already built 25 years worth of relationships with.
Yeah, well, that to me it's sort of one of the biggest compliments you can give me, because it's in my heart. That's how I feel. I'll tell you that relationship with your uncle or many others in this community was reciprocal. If I had a need, if the city had a need, I could also reach out to him. And I could say, hey, this is what we're struggling with, or some of his work in the homeless space and trying to get shelter for people, or on and on and on. And it wasn't a, hey, I need your help getting this permit. Those, I didn't get a lot of that. Yeah. I mean, what I got is, hey, here's what I'm trying to do, trying to move the ball forward. Can you help? Just want you to be aware of this, or can you help us get in touch with the right people? And, Patrick, it feels like that's the same role that I'm playing here. But I know what I've learned about myself is that it's, and honestly, leaving one of the best jobs on the planet to come to Elevations, I never thought I'd be at a financial institution, but
I never thought I'd be in a mortgage business.
Yeah, exactly. And so, Chris, maybe we ought to talk about your trajectory. But for me, and frankly, it does come down to community building. And I'm with an organization now in Elevations Credit Union that is passionate about community building and believes in Fort Collins. So if that weren't the case, it's not like I would have gone to work for some other bank. That wasn't my interest. Mm-hmm. My interest was long-term. And so as that community, just to wrap it up a little bit, as that community goes from 180 to 255. And by the way, the area that I'm trying to help is with all of Northern Colorado. You guys know for sure that Loveland, Greeley, Fort Collins is the third fastest growing region in the United States. So there's community building opportunities pretty much unlimited, and there's business activity as well. And so let's make sure the work that's going on is done with integrity and interested in building great communities and doing it in a character-based kind of way. And I'm very, very bullish for Northern Colorado and for the company that I'm contributing with.
Darin, what are you most proud of when you on your 25 years serving the city, and what do you want to see done going forward? Is that is somebody moving to Northern Colorado? You had a great story before we started recording about your friend who played baseball who wants to retire in Fort Collins, and Patrick has a channel and talks to individuals that are moving to Fort Collins all the time from all around the country. And I'd be curious to say, hey, yes, we have this great town. We have this, we have the mountains, we have CSU, but here's what else is coming. Like what are you excited about for the future, and what are you most proud about, like that you helped kind of establish in your last 25 years?
Man, that's a big question, because I could probably list off 50 projects that Max Busso at Rapid Transit, the North Side.
I was going to say, like, public transportation is something I'm curious about.
Yeah. I mean, I honestly, if I were to talk about projects, I mean, Patrick, as you mentioned, your uncle, Old Town Square, and now the expansion of Old Town Square that's under construction. I walk by it every day right now, and that's going to be incredible. I'm actually sad that I don't get to be part of that. I have to watch it. I'm just like, I was telling a colleague the other day that it's like, if there's one capital project right now, that one is like, I want to just, but I love also seeing the momentum, right? So I could probably list a lot of exciting projects, community parks, and the broadband utility is a game changer. I mean, some of our internal systems moving to budgeting for outcomes and using the Baldrige framework. I think about the culture that we built at the city around a culture of excellence and not average thinking, and during COVID, how difficult that's, how different it's been, and how hard for some people, and for some people it's been the best time of their careers. It just, I think about, having said all that, I think probably the thing I'm most proud of is the relationships that have been built, and also promoting this idea of thinking big. And I don't mean population like 500,000. I mean why, as we talked about earlier offline, if there's going to be the safest community in the United States, well, why shouldn't that be Fort Collins?
Yeah.
Well, and so if you talk to Chief Swoboda, he and I talked about that in our final interviews for him becoming the chief. And, 2 weeks later, I hear him presenting that, hey, look, the city aspires to be the safest community in the United States. Why would I not want to be part of that? Mm-hmm. So I think probably that the way that community gets done is through relationships, and also systems that can, we don't want to have excellence sort of just on a one-off kind of way. We want to have excellence that is replicable. And that, in other words, it's not just I'll be flip about this. I'll use a date with my wife. Wow, what a great weekend. Well, I want great weekends with her, but I also want to just keep getting better in my marriage, and as a husband, and as a dad, and as a employee. So why wouldn't we want to get better as a community? So I guess, I'll never forget the first, when we started talking about using the words world class, I literally would have people rolling their eyes like, oh, geez, here he goes again. People still, did he mention world class? Because he's going to do it. I don't care if it's world class. It can be best in class. It can be a 95th percentile, but just for me, just not average. And I think that in what I've seen over the last 25 years is your guys' hometown allows us to think big. Now, there are grumpy people, and there are people who want to think average, but fortunately it's, and you guys are trying to interview them, but I could name 20 names right off the top of my head of people who constantly, year after year after year, decade after decade, were encouraging me and the council and the city staff to drive excellence in one way or another. So that probably, I'm super proud about big thinking and super proud about relationships. I think the city of Fort Collins is a very high performing organization. Now we're not perfect. We can fix some things, but so Chris, I told you early on I can ramble. So that's
it. I was just going to ask you, are you going to ever run for mayor?
No, that's
all right.
No, man.
You got a great gig right now. I
do have a great gig. I do want to tell you something, because this is part of my own narrative as well. That, in the 25 years that I've worked at the city, I've worked with 40 council members and 6 mayors. I mentioned that. And I will tell you that the relationship between the mayor and the council and the city manager and the staff is so critical. I had a council member tell me one time, I asked him, I said, why does there seem to be a tension between you and me sometimes, or between you and the city staff? And this council person said, well, to my constituents, I look weak if I'm too close with the city manager and the staff. that's not my definition of leadership.
Yeah.
My definition of leadership, and you think about a sports team that has an owner, a general manager, a head coach, a quarterback, don't you want to be like bulletproof aligned? Doesn't mean they don't have tensions but gosh, we ought to be electing. And by the way, you guys, elections matter.
You talk about this. I was thinking about this earlier on, like the elections in Fort Collins when it comes to city council, like I put way more weight on that now after hearing how, like in my mind, I'm like, I want people with different backgrounds and different ideologies because that's just going to create a stronger team. And,
it is.
No, I didn't mean to cut you off.
But here's what I would suggest. My theory is, in the private sector, if you have a board of directors that really doesn't like the company or despises the CEO, my question is, how long would that person last on the board of directors of a private company? Not very long, or a publicly traded company, right? Mm-hmm. But in the public sector, we can have that. Now, I fortunately, of those 40 and those 6 mayors, I mean, I had brilliant conversations with almost every single elected official that I've worked with in Fort Collins alone over the last 25 years. But I shared that example because I think as a community, we ought to be encouraging our elected and our staffs to constantly work through those things and work together. And we have a great history, but the more tense things get and the more I think we ought to pay attention to that as a community. Because I think we want our team working together. The other thing that I was thinking about this when I was gardening one time, about 10 years ago, literally, I was thinking we were having some challenges with another governmental entity in Fort Collins. Like it was really hard to work with them. And I remember gardening, literally thinking, if my neighbor knew how bad the relationship was between the city of Fort Collins and this entity, they would be like, are you kidding me? Get your act together. You guys, I want a healthy school district. I want a healthy university. I want a healthy hospital or a health district. And you all should be working well together in the county, right? Yeah. But we weren't. And I remember just thinking, gosh, the taxpayer could care less. They want us working well together. So I think, electing people and appointing people in these critical positions that are collaborators and don't just take their ball and run home when they don't get what they want, and that was sort of a big part of my career here in Fort Collins, was trying to show the commonalities between a school district and a university and a county and a state and so forth. And so anyway.
No, I mean, I think that applies to the macro picture as well.
It does. It applies to business too, right?
Yeah.
I mean, yeah.
Which, I want to be respectful of your time because we've got 8 minutes before I know you've got to jump and you got a 12:15. So we have a question that we always end with, but one of the things I want to know, what are you most excited about with Elevations Credit Union in the near term future? Do you have any projects or anything that you're working on specifically that just really gets you up in the morning that you, like you said, thinking big? I'm sure there's some big projects. If you're not going to think small of, I want to close this $500,000 mortgage right now.
Yeah.
Like, that's part of the day-to-day operations, but we've got this project. We're opening up that beautiful building that you guys did on Mountain Avenue, or what is the next project that Elevations has coming that really Fort Collins can look forward to?
Yeah, well, thanks for the question. I would say the biggest thing that I look forward to is our future in Northern Colorado. Elevations was founded and began in Boulder and then grew to Louisville, Superior, Broomfield. And I mean, honestly, the reason why I'm here is how important Northern Colorado is to Elevations Credit Union and the relationships, Patrick, that you asked about earlier. I would say I love being part of the built environment, and then the nuanced balance between environmental, social, and the physical development, economic development of community. So I'm excited about Elevations being part of commercial financing. I'm excited about, and I know this is going to be sappy, but this idea about families sort of accomplishing their dreams and buying homes and getting, talking with people who historically maybe have been unbanked and helping people, maybe a a person that's always dreamed about having a landscape maintenance business, and they've not been able to do that, and helping that and playing in the diversity, equity, inclusivity space is really, really important. So I know it's not a particular building, although the building I'm in right now on Mountain Avenue is just a gorgeous, four-story building. I would say it's genuinely partnering as we move into the next, in the future growth of Northern Colorado. I wish I could say there's 6 projects that are like super exciting. Now, as a resident of Fort Collins in Northern Colorado, we didn't talk about Montava. We didn't talk about Cottonwood Blends. We didn't talk about future expansion of bus rapid transit. Future growth.
We'll bring you back for that.
Oh man, you guys look. And I know we do have a timeline. This is like therapy for me. Okay. And what I'm grateful for too is just the way you guys love the place too. I'm so jazzed that you're having this conversation. So if I can help you with future topics, or I can come back, as a guest and just have, 15 minutes of therapy, I'm all in.
We'll definitely do that. No, I will have to bring you back with Montava. I know I've talked with Max Moss, and I'd love to get more of your thoughts on that. But
yeah,
so we one of our last questions we ask all our guests is, so obviously Fort Collins is a big beer town. Actually, Patrick and I did a little beer episode earlier. But do you have a favorite brewery or patio that you like to visit?
Oh gosh,
and you don't say all of them. Give us one. We don't want the Wade Troxel political answer here. Come on, there's got to be a favorite.
There's tons of them. There really, really are. So you just said, hey, tell us what you think, and then you got to be in here. I'm gonna say, I love 90 Shilling, and I love Odell's. I love Win and Corky and Doug, and that patio is incredible. When my mom visits, she can get a glass of wine.
That wine the add-on they did was really cool.
It has a high bar too, coming from Sonoma.
Yeah, exactly. And our family, by the way, that dairy farm was converted to a vineyard about 25, 30 years ago. So my mom and her siblings have a little 110 acre vineyard. But I'm going to tell you, I'm going to tell you that I think that's it, just because I know, the story. But man, I got to be able to mention something about Jeff and Kim Jordan and New Belgium and Horse and Dragon and all the other new stuff that, what's the one down? Oh gosh, I got to mention, it's one of Wade's favorite places and I love it.
It's the one on Taft?
Or no. The little one by the mall.
Oh, the Gilded Goat.
The Gilded Goat. The dude is awesome. I'm sitting here. He's a friend of mine. I can't remember his name.
No, that is a cool one. That is a great.
I love that place. Cool. So.
All right.
There you go.
You passed.
Well, Darin, man, I appreciate you joining. And yeah, absolutely. I think it would be great to have you back. And, I think anyone listening to this can benefit from the passion that, you and others bring to Fort Collins and the thought of excellence. So we are grateful for such an awesome community and awesome people who have had such a major impact on its development and what it looked like 25 years ago and what it's going to look like for the next 25 years.
Thank you, Darin. Really appreciate it.
You guys are awesome. I appreciate what you're doing. And thank you.
All righty, guys. Until next time.